Hey there, everybody. This is Bro here, and I'm here to advertise and showcase a podcast that I do with my friend Murph on the Twin Geeks channel or the network, the site. It's a video game podcast that covers all sorts of things. This episode, what I'm going to do is take video clips and just clip the different discussions, very specific ones, because each episode covers a wide variety of topics. Today's episode or this episode aired or posted on March 1st, 2022, and it was a Half-Life double feature where Murph and I discussed Half-Life's 1 and 2. And without further ado, here we go. So our first game of the week is Half-Life 1, a 1998 game for the PC. It's a first-person shooter. So in 1996, former Microsoft employees Gabe Newell and Mike Harrington founded a game development company called Valve. Inspired by sci-fi horror shooters like Doom and Quake, and even Stephen King books like The Mist or the manga Akira, Valve wanted to make a horror first-person shooter. They approached id Software and got the licenses for both the first Quake engine and Quake 2. According to dev interviews, they added about 75% of their own code, which manifests in the game as skeletal animations or extensive AI behavior and scripting, which we'll talk about. It feeds into the gameplay. They got a publisher through Sierra Online. The first year of development was a complete disaster. They were complete rookies and didn't know what they were doing. So after that, they scrapped everything and then took another year to make the game. And there they applied 3 principles of design, which we can talk about whether or not those actually reflect in the final product. 1, events triggered at the player's pace. 2, levels would respond to player action, such as even minute details like bullet holes or interactable objects. And number 3, the player would be extensively warned of danger. In my opinion, this mostly comes from the sound design. They also, during the reboot, got Mark Laidlaw, a professional science fiction writer, to touch up the story and flesh it out. Half-Life 1, in terms of the story, is about an MIT graduate and theoretical physicist named Gordon Freeman going to work at a top secret research facility called Black Mesa. He shows up to work one day late, and he works at the Sector C test lab, and he has this special radiation suit called the HEV suit that protects him from many different forms of harm. During the experiment, there is a resonance cascade, which basically just means there is an interdimensional alien invasion coming out. There's aliens up the wazoo. Your goal for the rest of the game is to survive, largely. It's special mostly because of the immersive first-person perspective that doesn't really take you out of the game for cutscenes or heavy scripting. At least in those terms. And then in terms of the gameplay, there is heavy scripting. The level design is very strict and linear, and events are very clear. And every engagement and encounter is calculated. To many, it became a classic, influenced the genre in general, yada, yada, yada. Murph, I have a question for you. What was your experience with Half-Life before going into this?
I don't have any. This Half-Life is a huge blind spot for me. I know that they're very famous and revered, but I can't really say that I've ever seen like even gameplay of them. Like, I think all my knowledge of Half-Life comes from like listicles that they appeared on. Like, I know IGN way back when named Half-Life 2 their game of the decade, and I would see like Gordon Freeman appear as like third best protagonist in a video game, or the gravity gun is the best weapon in gaming. Um, I don't even know. I didn't even know like the general premise. Like, I know there's a G-Man. I know there's a character named Alex because there's a VR game that came out called Half-Life Alex. It shares a universe with Portal because GLaDOS sings about Black Mesa. Aliens?
So
Question mark.
so then, as you started playing Half-Life One, what were your thoughts?
So I figured that they were like a straightforward shooter because I never hear anyone say like, "Oh, we should go back to the days of Half-Life." I never knew how straightforward a shooter they are. Like,
Yeah.
it's particularly Half-Life One. Um, in Half-Life One, I never really see anyone talk about. Like, I don't see that pop up on any lists.
No, I would say it's probably like held to posterity and that's it. Like I don't necessarily people laud the game other than its influences now, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
And I don't have much experience with shooters of like the late 90s. Like I played through a bit of like Star Wars Dark Forces back in the day when I tried to get myself to like those games. Um, but the most recent thing would be like Halo 1, which came out 3 years later.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, there's I compared it to like System Shock 2 or something, or like
Yeah.
even Deus Ex or something. Those are a little bit more RPG focused and stuff. But that being said, like, there's still an immersive element to it. Yada yada yada. For me, I think like comparing this to, you know, Doom and Quake, I think those things are like naked in comparison. And like,
Mhm.
there's other first person shooters that came out that are more modern, but like those would have extensive cutscenes, for instance,
Mhm.
or they would have I don't know when Daikatana came out,
I
but
don't
like
I don't
that's
know.
what I imagine, was like otherwise the landscape of first person shooters on PC.
Yeah, Half-Life 1 feels very constructed. It almost feels like a tabletop RPG module. Like I feel like I felt like I was in dialogue with the devs. Like I'd say I'm going to go over here and then I could just imagine like someone saying, "Well, if you go over there, then you're in sight line of that guy over there." It felt like early Castlevania in that way. Does that make sense?
Are you saying basically that in terms of like a tabletop RPG, you felt how the DM planned for your behaviors?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes complete sense.
I
I
felt like
think,
all my actions were accounted for in some way, which is admirable.
but it probably feels too transparent, possibly.
Yeah, is particularly because it was always very clear, like, okay, something's gonna happen here, something's gonna happen here. Like, it very rarely surprised me.
Sure, but let me ask you then, was the pacing good for you? That's one of the things I liked about Half-Life, other than like maybe level quality, is sometimes the pacing was really solid. Like I in both of these games, I felt good sense of breathing, puzzles, not even puzzles, but like just the times it slowed down were good.
Yeah, I think
And the times it picked up were great.
I think it has good pacing, but I think the pacing is killed by some of the bullshit.
Sure.
Um, like my overall complaint with the gameplay is I think healing should have been more prevalent because there's an overwhelming feeling of that like you have to perfect this shootout otherwise you're not going to have enough health for the next shootout because there's just like almost no health drops and you have to recharge from these like stations on the wall where it only feels convenient to go and heal once you have dealt with the enemies because otherwise they'll just come up and cap you while you're holding E.
And in terms of the 3D space, the thing I didn't like about the there's two things. I like the aliens.
Yeah.
I think the military men, like the when the military comes into Black Mesa, I think that's because they're hit scan. I think the
Yeah.
hit scan is a major problem for what you're talking about. It would be different if it's like the Vortigons or the head crabs. I think all of those are manageable.
No, I wish there was more of the game built around those enemies. Because I
Yes.
kind of like the sort of die hard with aliens aspect in like the first, I don't know, hour or so before the military show up.
Yeah. What do you think of like the first 40 minutes or whatever where you're not fighting anything?
I like that. I like the introductions of games where you just sort of walk around and see the environment before it goes to hell. Um, I don't mind that. one lick. I think there could have been more things to, like, I don't know, see and do around
Yeah,
the Black Mesa offices.
sure. But otherwise, it's a
Or
yeah.
maybe seeing like more of the environment that you're going to like have to fight out of. Like, I thought at some point you were going to get back on that train you came in on, and then that would be like a whole sequence, but it's not. The train you get
Yeah.
on is like, I don't even know where in relation.
No, yeah, yeah. The geography of the area is actually like for a setting, the locations feel a little bit, even though it's so linear, it feels like I can't connect or draw a map.
No, with this space feels massive. There's like extensive underground labs, a whole like sewer slurry system, an above
Yeah.
ground military base aspect, canyons. That is a good shot when you walk out of that tube and you're in the canyons and the Valve theme plays.
Oh yeah, that's it. That's in surface tension. Surface tension's a good level, Murph. And then like you're
Yeah.
scaling the thing.
I think that's a good
You,
level, yeah.
it has a lot of military people, but like I think that's a really good sense of verticality. And then it ends on like a helicopter uh, fight with the missiles. I
Hmm.
was going to say I didn't write it down. I need to say it. I like the weapons in this game. I do.
Hmm.
I love them. Especially, it's just such a minor choice. Is there's no sniper in the game.
No.
What it is a crossbow,
Yeah.
and I like the crossbow.
Crossbows are preferable to sniper rifles, in my experience. The one thing about the weapon variety, and this helped me unlock something about how to tell if a first person shooter is good or not.
Okay.
If the submachine gun is a useless weapon, it's a bad game.
Okay. Yeah.
I think Half Life 1 has a useless submachine gun.
Doesn't it have the alt fire? The alt fire is good.
Does it in 1 or does that add it in 2?
I'm pretty sure it's in one. Pretty sure. I'm
If it does, I
now
never
I'm
used it. I didn't even
I
know about it.
I regret playing all the games at once now because they are all bleeding together. Because I also played Black Mesa and now I'm
Ah.
like, oh wait, did it? I'm pretty sure it did.
I don't
I'm
think it
like
does. I never
80%.
used it.
It doesn't list it on the bottom. That was the
Ah,
thing is I just alt clicked it.
I see. Well,
I'm 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 like 80% sure, yeah. Because I would use it to like pop in and out for the giant monsters, those giant aliens.
yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? That shoot
Hmm.
the homing things.
Yeah, the
I would pop
Needler
in
from
and out and
Halo.
use that. Anyways, it doesn't matter. Um, what do you think about the later sections of the game?
The later sections of the game, like, are you talking about Zen specifically, or
We don't have to talk about Zen just yet. I think once we get to the later parts of the labs and the Lambda stuff, it starts to get old. I think it gets
yeah,
old for
I
me.
think this game is a bit too long. Um, it's especially once it like has you starting to do like platforming and stuff. Like, it has very organic feeling like level progression. Like, you're always climbing up a pipe or like up some boxes that are conveniently placed. But because of that, it's not always clear where to go. Like, I think in surface tension when you're scaling up like the cliffside, and there's like that minefield and there's that one sand trap with like the blind tentacle thing. A lot of the path forward is obscured by like rocks that are like arranged just so that they don't seem like there's a path.
Yes.
And I spent a long time wandering around there, trying to find the path forward. Luckily, it's easy to move around because Gordon runs like a motherfucker. Fuck, can he run?
And the thing I don't like, my honest complaint this time around for both of these games, it was easy for me to remember. Oh, I got to do this one thing, or I got to do
Mm.
this. I was worried that you weren't gonna like two for that because it gets a little weird in like locks, for instance. But anyways, the thing I didn't like about Half-Life 1 this time around in terms of the environment and where to go is there was still a lot of like small holes you gotta crawl
Oh,
through.
yeah.
And you gotta look for the small
You
hole.
gotta crouch jump, which is
And then,
spotty
yeah,
at
you gotta
best.
crouch jump. And you're like, what the fuck? And then ladders. Ladders are like the hardest
Ladders,
thing in the game.
ladders are the ultimate enemy. Like, oh my god, I'm surprised. Ladders are so bad that I'm shocked Half Life 2 doesn't have a joke about, like, Gordon having a ladder phobia. Like it should be so self-aware that ladders don't work in this game. You will be climbing up a ladder and then like your momentum will pop you off over the side of it and have you fall down.
Yeah. Yep. 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 And then like for the later stuff too, like I don't like those bigger alien enemies, and they only show up near the end of the labs.
Yeah.
I really just like the Vortigons and the head crabs and the zombies. Like that's where we're at. The bread butter's good.
Yeah.
You know. And then when it gets to Zen, how do you feel about Zen?
I didn't mind Zen all that much. I was a little perplexed when I thought the giant testicle spider was the final boss, because that's what it seemed like. Like it pops out and like a voice says, "You will not survive." And I was like, "Oh, this is the mastermind, the testicle
This is
spider."
the big one.
But it turns out it's not. It's this giant atropal from Dungeons and Dragons 3.5.
Yeah, basically.
And that's a bad boss.
Well, before we talk about that, I will say I think I had problems with Zen even now. I think I'm warmer to Zen now, but that being said, the thing I really don't like, and a thing I noticed when I played briefly the Black Mesa rework of Zen, and it's like completely redone. It's like from the scratch. There are still like design principles that they go for. Like, okay, Zen is heavy in platforming.
Yeah.
Like they definitely approached it like that. But one of the differences in Black Mesa is you don't take fall damage after you get the jets to a long jump.
What a helpful change.
Yo, yeah. Like I think Zen's big problem is you take fall damage. I think that is the core complaint, and technically Valve alleviates it because at that point you have infinite healing springs when you can find them, but you gotta find them.
Yeah, and then stand in them for however long it takes to fully heal you.
Oh yeah, loads of fun. And then at a certain point in time it just doesn't work. I enjoy at a certain point in time the Zen level becomes like the factory. I like the factory. I think that's a great level.
Yeah.
Because it's still closed in. It's still platformy, but it's more just like jumping on gears or whatever. And like that, to me, it all works.
It does do another thing I don't like in first-person shooters, where in the late game they introduce a little flying shitty enemy that can just spam orbs at you.
Yeah.
Those guys aren't fun to fight because they're hard to hit. And you don't.
What weapon did you end up using to kill him?
I mainly just used like the pistol because that felt like, I don't know, quote unquote precise. Or I could probably bullseye them with the Magnum most of the time, but I was trying to save that ammo.
I tried bullseyeing with the Magnum. Technically, I think the pistol is the most precise, at least on first shot. On first shot, I think the pistol is the most precise weapon.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah. And then when you get into the Nihilanth, the final boss, it's a fuck up.
Yeah.
It's a fuck up.
I was fighting it for 30 minutes before I just like paused the game and looked up a guide, because I'm like, there's no way I've been shooting at it for this long and it's not like even showing damage yet.
Yeah.
And the answer is you gotta like destroy these little crystals on the wall that seem like they're just part of the environment.
Yeah. There's well, okay. To be fair to Valve, those crystals are like the only thing that's bright and colorful in the room.
Yeah.
Everything else is dark and gross. However, against the point, before that, when we've all been crawling through Zen, we saw colorful crystals everywhere as just part of the set.
And it's not part of like, you could have done that in Zen in like an earlier sequence where it's like, ooh, destroy the crystals, otherwise your enemies will keep healing.
You should have killed or destroyed crystals to prevent healing or whatever, to learn the mechanic. Instead, it's just like, oh, good luck, kid. Good fucking luck.
Yeah. And then, like, I landed on its head several times when its, like, skull wasn't even open. I just, like, kept shooting at it, but nothing happened. So I'm like, okay, this isn't the solution then. And then the entire time, it's just shooting LimeWire logos at you that warp you into a different room full of shitty little flying goblins.
Yeah, and then it's like another platforming segment. Those segments sometimes you can heal in, but like it's not fun. It's fucking no.
And then it ends.
It ends. What'd you think of the ending?
It's very abrupt. I don't know. I saw the G-Man. Is that his canonical name, the G-Man?
No, they call him the G-Man because that's his model. Like if you loaded
Ah,
up the multiplayer, that's his like model name is G-Man.
okay. Um, yeah, I saw the G-Man throughout like the various levels. I'm like, oh, he's probably something. But when he just like you step through that portal and then he's just speaking at you, that's
You're like, whoa.
yeah. I was just like, did I miss a cutscene? Did I do that boss fight wrong? Actually, it wouldn't have felt so abrupt if it was just like you're going through and you like see the Black Mesa lab, the Lambda laboratory. They're like, oh, Gordon Freeman's coming back through, and then the G-Man like pulls you back,
Yeah,
and then it's not so abrupt, and then you get an idea of like, oh, I'm being like robbed the chance to
of
escape,
something.
yeah, rather than just suddenly getting spoken at.
I was just thinking this will lead into Half-Life 2. We'll do a transition or whatever. But like thinking about the G-Man, I really wish there were just like more than just generic NPCs in the game.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Because then the
Like I wish
G-Man
there
would
were
he would know
characters.
that's a distinct character rather than
Yes.
a.
Yeah.
Mm,
Seriously. Because like number one, yeah, every other character in this game is a generic NPC. So technically speaking, other than like near the end where it would get weird, like it could just be a fucking businessman,
yeah.
and then you'd be like, okay, whatever, who cares? You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and just going into Half-Life 2, they spoiler alert, they had to make up NPCs
Oh yeah.
and then be like, remember me from Half-Life 1 even though I wasn't in it?
Mm-hmm.
Like they should have at least given us a little bit more to go off of instead
Yeah.
of just the pure, because like even if you're immersed in Half-Life 1, you would know the people in the Sector C test labs.
Mm-hmm.
You would be like, that's Jeffrey. You know Jeffrey.
Yeah.
Hey Jeff, how's it going? You know what I mean? Like there's no nothing. And that I think is that's a problem they eventually fixed in Black Mesa. But like I think narratively it's undercut. And I think Half-Life 1 is so direct. In some ways it's a blessing that it's just so pure. And in
Mm-hmm.
other ways it's a curse because the game does try to take itself seriously in narrative, you know?
Yeah. No, I think um, it's very unintentionally funny. In a
Yeah.
lot of parts, particularly with all like the NPC deaths, where it's just like this guy's running and then a server next to him explodes and falls over and he explodes into like six different chunks. Like I
Yeah.
don't know what emotion I'm supposed to feel other than laughter, which I did quite a bit. Um, like I don't know how seriously do you think like the devs were taking this narrative? Like, do you think they thought it was like the next big sci-fi story, or do you think it was just they were just fucking around?
Okay. I would say it's a blend between the two. First of all, if they hired Mark Laidlaw. I think
Yeah,
they did take it seriously. Yes. I think they took it to a certain extent seriously. I think when it comes to the NPCs and like those deaths, I think they do play those up for effect. I
yeah,
will say in the original, if you look back at earlier dev stuff, the faces were more cartoonish. Like all
okay,
of the reactions and stuff, and every time they update it, you played source technically, so
hmm,
you were like halfway through the thing. Like there were 3 remodels basically, and each remodel got progressively more realistic and less cartoonish or exaggerated. Does that
okay,
make sense?
yeah,
So I think there was an inkling that yes, you're supposed to laugh at these things, and they also do intend for you to do some things that, like, for instance, you can get the pistol early if you kill the first security guard you see, and that is
why would
clearly
you?
intentional. What?
Why would you attack that guy?
So you could get the pistol early.
Oh, oh no.
No, but they knew that. Like, I think that is 100% intentional.
Hmm.
They knew that like there was a way for you to be bad. You could be bad as Gordon Freeman, and they just
Okay.
let that happen.
I know. I
And
didn't even think that you could like kill the NPCs or even like attack them.
you can kill any NPC. The game will reset to your save if it's an NPC that needs to open a door. That's
Oh,
about it. That's
okay.
it. And then it'll be like, you missed a mission critical asset or you killed a critical asset. Otherwise, every NPC is killable.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, no, and it's weird. And I think, for instance, when we get to like the physics engine of Half-Life 2, I think they still intended for deaths to be funny.
Yeah.
Specifically with the ragdolls.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be like a scenario where it's obvious that there's a sort of morbid uh, cartoon reaction that you're meant to feel. It's supposed to be satisfying when you kill enemies. And it's supposed to be, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's one of those things. Um, they do put a lot of care into that stuff. Like the Vortigons, for instance, depending on how fast you kill them, if you hit a certain damage threshold, they will stop attacking you and they'll run away.
I did notice that. I did notice that.
Yep. No. So they cared about like NPC interaction and stuff to a certain extent. And I guess I should say before we move off, it's really hard to like describe how much of this was unique at the time. And like a lot of people even now would be like, "Oh, dude, the AI behavior was so incredible." And obviously, it's super basic. It is super basic. But to a lot of people, like being able to flank Gordon Freeman and being able to coordinate like grenades and stuff, those were really unique for the time.
Yeah. No, I mean it does feel important. Like, I can recognize that for the time this was probably very advanced, particularly with how it tells its story with like the, I don't know, persistent everything's done in engine. I didn't really enjoy it because I
No, that's fair. I
yeah,
think that's fair. I think the game is dated. I
no.
think the game is for sure dated. And would I recommend this game to anyone not trying to be like I am trying to experience Half-Life objectively? Then I would like recommend Black Mesa or something.
Yeah, no, I want to try Black Mesa because I think there is a way this could be polished up.
Yeah. I think you would like it. Yeah.
Is it worth playing these expansions?
Oh, I was going to ask you that. Would you be interested? First of all, how interested are you?
Do they play the same?
No, slightly yes. I mean, technically yes, in terms of there's not anything that's going to break the mold. I will say, so Opposing Force is a game where you play as the military and you are trying to like kill the scientists.
You play the bad guy? Okay.
Yeah, you play as the bad guy. Yes. But and then it turns into something more interesting. They go a little bit weirder with it. There's a higher emphasis on combat and gunplay, but you got to consider there is basically new enemies, and they added an entirely new alien race from the planet X. And this is why people debate whether or not it's canon. But there's like a bunch of new enemy alien varieties in the game, and there's a bunch of new weapons. So like there is a completely new angle to go off of if that would take your fancy.
Okay, that does sound interesting. That it's effectively like a completely like different, I don't know, I guess story. Okay, that's interesting. Now what about Blue Shift?
Okay, Blue Shift is a little bit more subdued, I would say, probably canonical too, because you play as Barney, the security guard. And it's literally just you gotta escape Black Mesa, and you escape with like other scientists and stuff. And it is what's interesting about it to me is there's less of a focus on pure gunplay. There's less guns than base Half-Life 1, so it's much more limited. Like for instance, you will spend an entire section with the pistol. For a long portion of the game, the pistol is your only real gun. And there's a lot more puzzling, platforming to it. And in just that way, it's also shorter. It's much shorter than the other two. So if you're curious about that, you could go in that direction where it's still like a sort of diehard experience, but it's more grounded, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like,
okay,
I would recommend trying them out. I will say they're both by Gearbox, and they are, I don't know how much you like Gearbox, but
I don't know. Is the Black Mesa team going to tackle either of those, or?
Technically not the Black Mesa team. There is a team that is redoing Blue Shift. Yes. There's like a couple levels already done in Blue Shift, I believe. I don't know if anyone's doing Opposing Force. I will also say there is one more Gearbox game that came out, and it is called Half-Life Decay, and it came out with like inside the PS2 port of Half-Life, and that is a co-op game.
I can't imagine playing Half-Life 1 on a PS2. That seems weird, right? That's weird.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. But like, and then the co-op experience is weird. I've never played the co-op game. Apparently, it's bad.
I mean, I've at least heard of Blue Shift. I've never heard of Decay. Decay isn't even listed on Steam.
You can't play. The only way to there's two ways to play it. Number one, you own a PS2 with a copy of Half-Life 2 or Half-Life 1, and then the game, obviously. Or you could. There are mods to Half-Life 1 that allow you to play like a kind of version of it, where they've recreated the maps and the models. What's interesting, though, other than the co-op aspect, is that they are both female protagonists. I don't remember their names. They're like Cross and Green, and they both have HEV suits. They are the other two HEV suits that aren't taken by Gordon at the start of the game.
Oh, okay. Well, that's kind of interesting. But I assume that one's like super not canon.
Yes, I believe so. Technically speaking, they reuse the model from. There's a training segment to Half-Life 1. Did you play that?
Yes, because I needed to figure out how to do the long jump.
Yes, yeah. One of the woman on that is one of the characters you play. But
okay.
Other than that, not really.
Huh.
Yeah, that's about it. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to talk about Half-Life 1 with. If you had to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate it?
I'd give it a.
Be honest. Don't be like.
I'm thinking about my honesty. I think I would give it a 6. And that's a generous 6. Because I did like, I am the kind of person who gets like wowed when a older game is still compelling. Like I was like that when I played the original Resident Evils. I was like, wow, this is still really effective. And I did feel that a bit for Half-Life, but I think just the gameplay is very outdated.
Yeah, no, for sure, 100%. I guess with that gameplay thing, we're going to continue forward into our second feature.
Oh yeah.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's intermission time. Observe the laws of your city, state, and nation. They exist to protect the rights and freedoms of everyone.
So now we are in. This is the first time we've done a second feature. I'm excited. This is Half-Life 2, a 2004 game for the PC.
Oh yeah.
What's particularly notable about Half-Life 2 is the advent of the Source engine, which Valve will later fine-tune as all their later games will go on. Their original Half-Life 1's modified Quake engine was called Gold Source, to be clear. So Gold Source came before Source. I'm going to be testing you later on this, Murph, okay?
Okay. Taking notes.
Okay, good. All right. And then this new Source engine offered way more tech upgrades. It's clearly evident if you look at them. Lighting. Most important thing would be a physics engine, and that physics engine goes deep into the design of the game itself. Another thing the Source engine did and was proud of was the heavy facial animations. Other graphics engines other engines at the time were probably more impressive in other ways, but they really decided to focus on heavily nuanced facial animations to sort of showcase emotion. And then like those would be the big things that will elevate the game and inform its design as we talk about it. The other thing to note about Half-Life 2's development is that there was actually a beta version of the game that leaked. So people got a glimpse of a much darker version of the game. There were children in the original version where they were like slaves. There was like entirely cut enemies, etc.
And let me guess, Disney told them to dial it back.
You know how it is. Murph, it's always the same story. You know what I'm saying?
Oh my god. And what was Gordon Freeman supposed to have a goblin mode?
Yeah, the rat, Gordon Ratman. Yeah, basically. The plot of Half-Life 2 is after your defeat of the Nihilant and then the employment by the G-Man, an indeterminate amount of time takes place. I hear reports of 10 years. I hear reports of 20 years. But G-Man places you back into City 17, a vaguely Eastern European area in aesthetic, and you find the entire world has been taken over by an interdimensional alien race known as the Combine, which is basically like a weird alien fascist totalitarian thing going on. Your goal is to team up with your former partners in Black Mesa and other rebels, specifically a woman named Alex Vance is your main companion, to take down the Combine, lead a rebellion, save the human race. Before going forward, Murph, after you beat Half-Life 1, what were you expecting of Half-Life 2?
This is like the big one. Like, I don't know your perception of Half-Life 2, but for me, Half-Life 2 was always, like, touted as, like, the greatest video game of all time. It's like that, Ocarina of Time, and, I don't know, fucking Morrowind, depending on who you speak to.
Sure.
Or Baldur's Gate 2, whatever the fuck. Like, this was always been put on a pedestal in my mind. Like I said, like it excludes to me. It always appeared on like best game of all time lists, best protagonist, best villain, best weapon lists. And I don't really know what I was expecting. Like I knew physics were involved. I knew it was a first-person shooter, but I didn't know any of the plot details. And now that I've played it, like, I don't know.
You still don't know. You have no idea.
Like, I liked it. I like this game a lot. I think this is a very good game. This is like a 8 or 9 out of 10.
Okay. All right. That's fair. Yeah, I agree.
You know, you may not... other people on the Twin Geeks network may get this comparison, but it's like when people say, like, Singin' in the Rain is the best musical of all time. And then you watch it, and it's like, this is a very good musical. I can't think of anything bad about it, but greatest of all time? Like, that's just kind of my feeling. Like,
okay, all right. So you were impressed by the game itself, but underwhelmed at comparing it to its legacy.
I think,
or its like reception.
Like, I think that's, and I think part of that reception definitely is like the mysticism of how it like just. The franchise ended.
Yeah.
You know, like it's easy to put a game on a pedestal when you're still pining for the continuation of a franchise.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. No, and like I mean, I'm sure the same thing's going to happen when Half-Life 3 comes out. I wanted to ask you again before we get like super into it in terms of expectations. I'm like being like beating Half-Life 1, what did you hope 2 did differently? You were like,
I was definitely hoping that the combat would be better refined. I was hoping for more variety. I think I was hoping for more of a story, because Half-Life 1 is just a lot of like people telling you to go to places and push buttons. Yeah, I was definitely hoping more to, for lack of a better word, feel something. I wanted to know why. I wanted to know why this was so praised.
I think, well, I don't think you found out why, but I do think the other things on the list in terms of refinement or whatever, I think those were largely successful. The thing that stuck out to me most about the game was the variety. You know, you said like in the last episode or maybe privately that you like games with a lot of variety in terms of things changing. I think Half-Life 2 is a game where each chapter is something completely different.
Oh, yes.
You know what I mean?
I think
still has, you know, is informed by the gameplay at large.
I think FPS games thrive on gimmick levels. I think this is something that Halo figured out and perfected. Yeah. I think it is very good to have your game be like, okay, this is the sniper level, this is the shotgun level, rather than being like, you can use either or in this scenario depending on how you want to approach the situation. Like, no, fuck that shit. Like I want to know that like I can just pick a level and be like, I want this experience right now. Like, and I think this game does that beautifully.
And like I do think there's like what's even cooler about it is like I think there's like twists to it too. So like
yeah.
Ravenholm, I think Ravenholm is probably like a standout chapter, right? Because it's heavy horror focused, but it's also the first time you get the gravity gun.
Yeah.
And then but like halfway through, I'll ask about the gravity gun in a bit, but like halfway through that, you get the shotgun. So then it becomes the shotgun level.
Yeah.
So like even in the segments themselves, the game's like, okay, I think your dopamine level's going down. It's time to up the dopamine, up the adrenaline. Like every time it starts to dial back down, or like Nova Prospect, the jail level, I don't like the turret segments as much, but like it will, like at a certain point in time, it's like, well, I guess the antlion thing is played out. Let's bump up the turret segments now. Like it will always do something different.
I think the only part of this game that overstays its welcome is the boat.
Oh yeah, water hazard, yeah.
I think that level goes on just a bit too long. You open a few too many dams, but I really like the car level.
Oh yes, that's super fun. Yeah. That one's much more at your own pace, where it's like less about puzzles or less.
Yeah.
The problem with water hazard is literally like, where the fuck do I go? So there's like 3 or 4 times where it's like a lock you have to shoot, or it's like just a thing you didn't turn because it's in a corner.
And you're also being like you're also being chased. Like you know, it's supposed to be like go go go. Okay, no, what? Don't go right here. Get out of your boat. Go in here and open a door so you can push a button to open a dam or whatever, and now it's go 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 go.
Yes. I will say, like, I guess when you say go go go, I just realized, I think I don't know how you played the game when Valve talked about like being at your own pace. I found both of these games were at their best when I was running, like, and I wasn't even shooting everything in my path. When I was just like, basically like focused in on what I have to do and just shooting what I can. That was when I was like in the zone. You know what I mean? Or like solving problems like that.
See, it's interesting you say that, because that's how I approach Halo. Halo to me is a game about just like getting to the end. Whereas with this, I think I stayed and like cleared every room so I could like explore around for like resources or pickups.
I think that's fair. No, and I mean, like when we talk about like the car segment, I think the car segment is like really beautiful for that, where you could stop. There's like a small village. You can go in the buildings. I think that's where it's like reflected for sure.
Yeah, no, that whole everything from that car up to the end, like I think the chapter's entanglement with the turrets.
Yes,
I think that chunk is like the highlight of the game for me. I love that sequence so much. I'm very pro having minions in games, and I can't tell you how tickled I was to like learn like, oh no, these nasty bugs you've been dealing with, now they're yours to command. Like I'm very shocked about like how little I've ever heard anyone talk about like how much variety this game has. Like I've never heard anyone talk about the ant
Most
lions.
people just talk about the gravity gun and leave it at that.
Yeah, no, this game has like so much variety, and I feel like I missed out not playing this when it released, because I would have replayed that antlion level like over and over again as a child. I know what I'm about.
Yeah, and to me that's really cool, is like the way they segment the chapters. That is a thing I do particularly like about Half-Life, where the chapters are clearly labeled and segmented, so you immediately know which level you want to play.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like that is so cool to me, to just be able to load in and be like, fuck it, I want to play this today.
Yeah.
For me, the highlight of the game was probably Ravenholm, or I actually like the ending a lot. I don't know how you feel about City 17 or like Anti-Citizen 1 or like the Citadel, but I really liked them.
I was very surprised the game kept going after Nova Prospect.
Yeah? You thought that was the end.
I was so geared up for like the finale, and then it kept going, and it kept going quite a bit. No, I like the Anti-Citizen 1 stuff, because again, it mixes up the gameplay. Now you have like squad mates. I wish the bug bait still had a use, or they removed it from your weapon wheel.
Yeah. So you wouldn't be tempted to bring out the bugs again.
Yeah. But maybe you could use it as like, I don't know, like a smoke bomb or some shit. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think, like, really my only complaint with the gameplay is that any fights with the rocket launcher, like where you have to use the rocket launcher, are very tedious. The gunships, the striders. Mainly because it takes multiple restocks of ammo to knock those things down finally.
It gets ugly, and then they have to like clearly segment it as like a boss arena. Like you so know when you have to kill the things.
Yeah.
It's so fucking obvious, and then it's like, I think my problem with the game, other than like, again, I would be worried for a new person where to go. It wasn't so much of a problem for me now because I'm like, I know what to do. But like for you, I was like, yo, this game may not be good. There's a chance this game is not good.
I always knew where to go. No, I think it's all very signposted very well. Like it's
good.
It's sort of the more polished version of what I was talking about with Half-Life 1, where Half-Life 1 feels very like I can see the hand of the dev placing like the pieces on the board. With Half-Life 2, the hand is invisible.
Yes, but it's still like got the elegance of it.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I think that's where, and like, unlike Half-Life 1, I feel like every gun has a use here. Like, the pistol, you know, you have a lot of ammo for it, but it's good for, like, disarming traps or taking out the barnacles. Is that what they're called?
Yes. Yeah.
Barnacles, and then the submachine gun is really useful. And and they give you so many, like, nifty ways to use the weapons, like that little physics ball the assault rifle can shoot out. Like, it just makes every shootout feel, like, dynamic. And the shotgun is your sniper rifle.
As soon as you run out of one gun, it's like I can pull out another, and it feels great. And the other thing I noticed, I will say, is like I think they had a really good pacing of when you get the weapons. Mm-hmm. How did you feel about like the gravity gun?
I thought the gravity gun was, I was about to say I didn't use it in combat all that much, other than to shoot exploding barrels and saw blades, because it didn't seem like shooting just rubble did anything.
No. Yeah, I basically used it for man hacks or exploding barrels. Yes.
Yeah, and it's so cool that like two of the enemies you fight are just basically physics objects, like the man hacks. Those are like, once I realized, oh, I can probably snag those with the gravity gun. That's cool. Or like you could use the gravity gun to like set up cover and stuff.
Yeah.
That's pretty nifty. And then of course the end game with the gravity gun. That's like so sublime when you realize like, oh, wait a minute, they just buffed me.
Yes, yeah, like they took away all your weapons but the gravity gun, but they supercharged the gravity gun. So then it becomes its own game.
And I unironically love it when games are like, in the last moment, we're gonna change up the gameplay on you slightly.
But like unlike Zen or something, it feels appropriate. Everything feels appropriate, and it doesn't feel like it's throwing you for a loop at any point. What'd you think about the story?
So the story is very straightforward, and there's not a lot of like payoff. There's not a lot of setup or payoff. Like, you're just basically like dropped into it, and they do something very clever, like right after you deboard that train the G-Man drops you off on, and where you like look to the side and you can see a Vortigaunt sweeping the floor. And you're like, oh, those were the main enemy of the last game, but now they're like subservient. So whoever is in control now must be real big dogs. My main issue is that there's no scene of just like simply explaining what's going on, like, which I think is like a topic for debate. Like, it's cool that there's...
How much did you try to... Let me ask you. I'm not blaming you, because I agree with you. I think there is a fundamental failure in trying to convey certain things. Mm-hmm. How much did you try to absorb the stuff? Like, did you listen to the Breen talks?
Yeah, I listened to the Breen talks. I, like, walked around. Like, I realized I could talk to people with E. But then, partway through exploring and trying to figure out the scenario, then they're like, run, 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 run. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and then especially like when it comes to the scripted segments with the side characters, a lot of those moments, those areas actually have a lot to explore and interact with. but they are unlike what Valve says. They are timed basically. They are very simple, and like you don't get a lot of like freedom to like breathe into the thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's just like, oh, it's time to do the thing, Gordon.
Yeah, and it's not like the game is above having moments where an NPC just exposits at you. You know, I think the most confusing part is that like everyone's happy and surprised to see Gordon rather than being like, where have you been? Like the last time we saw you was jumping through a weird portal at the Lambda complex. Do you even know what's going on right now? Like that's where having a silent protagonist is a very flawed thing, because it feels like Gordon has no like, I don't know, perspective on things. Like they're just, you show up at Kleiner's lab and he's like, all right, now get in the teleporter and we'll send you to Dr. Vance. And it's like, well, do I want to go to Dr. Vance?
Yeah. Oh, so like, okay, all right. First of all, yeah, I think the way they do the NPCs is initially clumsy, but at the end of the day, I am glad they did the NPCs. Because again, I would prefer this over Half-Life 1, where everyone is the same.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
No, I like,
so, like,
I like all the characters in this.
Yes, all the characters are fine. It's a weird stumbling block, but it's a fine retcon. I think my problem was shit, I lost it. Murph.
So find the problem. Is it there on the floor next to that can you need to pick up?
The can was great. To me, it's the little moments like that where it's like a moral, like, to me, those are the moral choices that matter, Murph.
Uh-huh. Deciding whether or not that litter shouldn't be on the floor, and you should pick it up.
Whether or not you're going to lick the boot of
because your good friend Barney Calhoun, who owes you a beer, told you not to make a scene and draw attention to yourself not 5 minutes prior.
Look, man.
You should pick up the can.
I'm a rebel, Murph, okay? That's the first thing you should know about me.
Uh-huh.
Anyways, no, I think I was going to say the problem with Gordon this is what it was. I found it. Thank you, Murph, for helping me. Gordon's silence isn't a problem to me. Let's say at the very end, when all the confrontation is happening and Breen is talking to you, Gordon not talking is perfect there for me.
Yeah.
Because then it's like, okay, there is like, he's not ruining anything. Any other game where the person would talk would probably ruin the scene, to be honest.
Yeah. I don't need Gordon saying like, fuck you, Breen.
Yes. Yeah. I don't need any of that. That's a problem, because that is taking me out of the experience. But I will say, I think it starts to fail once we've started to develop these other characters. Alex is the ultimate example of this, where Alex is sort of trying to talk to you and connect with you. She is basically, it's not said in the game, but it's kind of obvious, the love interest.
Yeah.
Right? She is meant to be your best friend or whatever. Like, there's supposed to be a budding thing between you two. But you are a wall. It is all you and no character to Gordon. So when she says like, "Hey, I really appreciate what you're doing out here," she's talking to nothing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that is where the game's like, okay, you're failing here. I don't know what the answer Valve should have taken, and I guess they could have done worse things, but I think it is a mark against.
Yeah. And I think like doing all those cutscenes in engine, like, you know, that's kind of novel, but at the end of the day, I'd like to be able to skip cutscenes if possible. Like I like trying to think of doing this on replay. You know, Alex is a cool character, but any level with her is going to involve like a good 5 minutes or so where you're standing around smacking walls with your crowbar until she opens the door.
No. Let me ask you, in terms of the story, how did you feel about the Combine and the setting?
So I like the setting of the City 17, because they use a lot of shorthand to explain to you like this is a dystopia. The Combine I didn't really understand as.
That's fair. I think that is a failure.
Not even as like a I don't even like I'm thinking back now, I can't even think of when they said like, "Oh, these are aliens" or "these are extra-dimensional beings." Like the most I got is like when Breen's like is talking about like, "Oh, they shut off our ability to reproduce." And I was like, "Okay, it's probably aliens because they have that
Yeah.
kind of technology."
Sure. Yeah.
But like I was very confused about like in the anti-citizen one, the little NPCs will say like, "Oh, Combine forces inbound," and it's those dudes in armor. And I'm like, okay, are those the Combine? Are they just human like aliens, or are those humans in armor? Like, is Combine the alien, or is that the dictatorship? I think is what I was very thrown off by.
I think without getting too deep into it, I think it's basically the dictatorship. And the way the dictatorship works is they sort of co-opt whatever
Yeah,
the other species
it's
is.
like
They
the
take
Covenant.
it. Yeah, they take it and it's theirs now. And if you're not part of that, you're dead.
Mm-hmm.
So like there's that, but I do think it is largely a failure because 90% of the time you're killing dudes in armor. That's
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah, I think this
That's
could have
yeah.
used a few more like alien type enemies.
Yeah. I like the Striders. I think the Striders are really cool.
I think the Striders are
But
real cool. I wish they had less health, but
oh yeah.
I wish they couldn't trigger uh how do I want to say this? When they shoot their blue beam and it like, oh, this is supposed to like cause a thing to collapse. You were moving too fast. Like it's difficult for me to conjure up the words, but like, oh, but they're gonna shoot a wall and a bunch of rubble's gonna fall. That's like a scripted part, but you're still in the shootout with them, so you're trying to get a good angle for the rocket launcher.
Yep. And I think that's where it starts to get ugly is it tries to be immersive, but like it goes into the scripted, do you see the hand thing?
Yeah.
And those would be moments where the hand starts to slip a little bit.
Yeah,
You
and
know?
I think anything to have to do with like actually defeating an enemy through the physics, I think is
Yes.
spotty. Like throwing the grenade into those floor turrets was
Yes.
much more
Oh,
frustrating than it needed to be. How do you feel about this game's like constant forward momentum?
As I said earlier, I think the game is at its best when I'm moving.
Yeah,
Right?
but
So
like
when I stop,
narratively, how does it feel? Like the fact that Gordon Freeman is awake for like 57 hours.
okay, so this is I guess the thing. How did you like the actual ending?
The actual ending, it feels like it's par for the course of the franchise, so it didn't bug me as much. And I think it's better like
You were ready after the first time.
yeah, and I think it's like better introduced. Like how they do it, where it's like the explosion and then it freezes and you're like, is something like, did my game crash? And then it's like, oh, it's the G-Man. And like, that's neat. I didn't see the G-Man as much. I think I only caught him on like a TV screen once, but I have to imagine he's like hidden all over the place like the first game.
Yeah, he's hidden all over. Yeah.
Okay.
He's everywhere.
So, like, that's neat. I think, what is the G-Man? Like, that's...
We don't know.
Okay.
I was going to say, and I guess we're going to start. I don't want to do too much lore. It's going to be a problem.
Okay.
Basically, he's unknown. He's an unknown. I was going to say, in terms of the actual ending, the way I view Half-Life 2 is it's like a race. I'm like racing as hard as I can, and I'm just having a blast doing it. Blah
Yeah.
blah 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 blah. There's a momentum. I'm building up, and then the G-Man hits, and it hits like a brick wall, but it's like a good brick
No,
wall.
he, like,
where
literally
it's-
stops the game, and that's neat. That's so neat.
and then it's like it's done. Is it that time again? I think the game is aware that it's fast. I think
Yeah.
the game is aware that it was a brisk pace, or at the very least in terms of story and like how it goes. You may take forever playing it, but like the game knows that like it doesn't feel like it's an extended time. You didn't breathe in this world very long.
No,
you
and I
know?
think that's probably contributing factor to people wanting a sequel. Because this
Yeah.
really does feel like this is the middle game. Like, overwhelmingly. I that was part of like my curiosity with the game, and I was like, is this a situation where people just want to continue it like a second one, or does it genuinely leave on a cliffhanger? And it's like it doesn't even leave on a cliffhanger. It's like you saw the first half of like a season 2 of a show, and they just never made the second half.
Yeah. Yeah. There's and then like everyone's like, oh, let's just talk about mysteries, like Reddit theories for
Yeah.
10 years now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But like that being said, they do continue it into later episodes. Would you be interested in playing the episodes?
Definitely. Definitely. If it's more of Half-Life 2, I definitely want to experience that.
Okay, what if I said most of it, even though there is like some variety, there's less variety. They're shorter, obviously, but there's also a lot more Alex.
Like Alex as in waiting 5 minutes to open a door, Alex? Or
Sometimes, yes.
uh you know what? Sure. I like
Okay.
Alex as a concept, as an entity.
We got it, boys.
I you know what? It's good to go back to a time when games didn't have politics. You know what? This is just a simple, straightforward game about toppling a repressive regime.
I enjoyed all that stuff. I guess oh, you know what?
You
I
remembered your
got the
point?
last thing I forgot. I got the complaint. And it's an important thing. We should say this. So the physics puzzles, do you think those are a sufficient use of the breathable time? As in the slow moments are when you have to like fucking figure out
Make a
lever.
seesaw.
Or yeah, you make a seesaw or some shit.
I don't think any of them really overstayed their welcome. You know, I wish the physics were used a bit more in the actual combat. As part,
Yeah.
like combat itself is a puzzle. Like I love it when games advertise themselves like that.
Yeah.
Like I feel like there should have been stuff like, oh, you can knock over these boxes onto these guys, or something like that. Or
Yeah.
you know, pile up crates to form your own barricades, but the crates, you know, are destructible, so it's not much of a barricade.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And like I obviously they tried a little bit with the gravity gun, but the gravity gun just isn't ubiquitous. There's just
Yeah.
clearly times to use it and there's times to not use it. You know?
Yeah. I think if the game relied too much on the gravity gun, then maybe it would overstay its welcome, because at that point it's like, well, why not make a whole game out of the gravity gun? I think it's very clear that physics were the driving feature of the game. Like I said, like two of your enemies are physics enemies. It's constantly like having you play with like buoyancy and crap. This is actually a genuine flaw with the game. That sewer segment where you have to
Yes.
like make floating like platforms for yourself.
Oh god,
It's
yeah,
very
that's bad.
hard to jump on a floating physics platform when your screen is flashing white from radiation damage.
Oh my god. Oh Valve, you fucked up. You fucked up
I would
big time.
install a mod just to remove that flashing effect.
Oh my god. Let me ask you. All right, so now we're gonna broaden this up a little bit. Number one, do you consider yourself a fan of this series now, or do you understand what the series is now?
I understand what this series is. I think I'm still in like the the questioning phase of like, is this the greatest game of all time? Like
Okay.
what I really don't get is whenever I saw like Gordon Freeman on like best video game protagonists of all time.
Yeah, I don't
I
think
think
I don't
that
think that's
I think that comes from the NPCs like hyping him up constantly. Like everyone's like, "Oh, Gordon Freeman's on the way to solve the problem." You know.
I will say I think with all that I enjoy that they tried to create some more depth to what's going on thematically and all that, but it doesn't pan out. Like you do wonder, like when you're playing, you're like, all right, they call me the one free man. How much do they fucking know about me?
Yeah,
I
like,
did like one thing 10 years ago.
and it seems like a
Like
lot of
what the
people
fuck?
made it out of Black Mesa. So,
Yeah. What? Who cares?
Kleiner made it
Yeah.
out of Black Mesa.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so like I guess the one story thing I'll say, and this was reflected in Half-Life 1. I don't know how much you caught on to it, but the Vortigaunts were clearly slaves, even in 1. Did you notice that?
No. Well, I kind of got the idea of like, you know, like the grunts in Halo, that image. Like,
Yes.
yeah, grunt class of, because, you know, it's different alien species.
Yes. Yeah. But like in the factory, for instance, there are non-hostile Vortigaunts. And then
Oh,
Black Mesa, once you go in, like the remake, once you go into Zen, they've just completely rewrote it to where it's like no Vortigaunts in Zen attack you.
yeah.
Like they are, and then they also have shackles and all blah 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 blah. And also, I don't know if you listen to the Nihilith voices or whatever. It seems clearly like they obviously didn't know about the Combine, but it like the game in the original tried to play into, oh, there's deeper mysteries than you could ever know, Gordon.
Yeah, I figured they were
Oh,
talking about the G-Man, because I knew the G-Man, it was like a concept going in. So when like the
yeah.
Nihilith is like, do not trust him, I
Yes,
figured they were
yeah,
talking about
shit like
that.
that. There's some deep shit, but like there's other stuff like I am the last of my kind or whatever. And also, if you looked at the Nihilant's like model, the model is like scientifically like something's happened to him. Like
Hmm.
he's been like the third arm's been etched into him. Like he
Hmm.
didn't. That's not a natural third arm. So like there's implications that there was another race that he's hiding from. It's the like Zen is a place of refugees apparently.
Yeah.
So like that's played into Half-Life 2. Half-Life 2, I think the one thing that I got this time around was when they talk about Freeman liberating people, the Vortigaunts are the main people that I get that from. Where the Vortigaunts are like, you saved us from the Nihilith, you have like taken off our shackles, and now there is only the higher master
Yeah.
to face. Like, so in that sense, I'm like, yes. But then also, you don't talk to the Vortigaunts that much. Like, that is like an optional conversation.
Yeah.
Like, so stuff like that is not communicated to the player. Those are things that, like, the onus to absorb the information of the plot is on the player. And to a degree, I like that. To a degree, I think it is a failing on the developer's part to not encourage players to do that. Because, like, there are so many segments in Half-Life 2 where there's an open field. The game is super linear, but there are giant open fields where you can just
Hmm.
walk around and it's empty space, and then hopefully there's some fucking med kits in a room.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like they should have rewarded exploration more. You
Yeah.
know?
Giving you a little lantern to illuminate ghosts of the past.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Bada bing, bada boom. Now we're gonna broaden it to other things. Did you like? How do you rank this in terms of other Valve games you played?
So I've
Because this was the last Valve series you did not
Yeah.
like touch at all.
Yeah. I've long said Portal 2 is like my favorite game of all time. Um, and to be honest, like that's kind of more of like a placeholder. Like it feels like a safe game to say, yeah, no, that's my favorite. Uh,
That's why people say Half-Life 2, Murph. Clearly.
I mean, I guess. Um, yeah, I think. I
I think Portal 2 is a better story than Half-Life
Yeah,
2.
I think Portal 2 is still my favorite Valve game. Um,
Sure.
it's hard to compare this to like Left 4 Dead because they're different
Yeah.
genres. I think
Yes,
I would
completely.
rather play most levels from Half-Life 2 again over like jumping into a game of Left 4 Dead.
That's fair.
And then you got
That's
like
fair.
Team Fortress 2, which I dabbled in a little, but that's like its own beast.
It's so crazy. I will say, like, one of the big appeals of this game series and the Source engine was the amount of spin-offs that came up. So like Gary's mod,
Hmm.
Counter-Strike, you know, all these things. And like Team Fortress was originally a Half-Life mod as well.
Yeah.
So like there's so much splintering off that this game produces. And it was so interesting to see that stuff. So like there's an entire legacy that's separate from that in terms of mods, you know?
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely curious about exploring some of like the fan mods or fan games. Like I love the Portal fan games like Portal Stories Mel or Thinking with Time
Yeah.
Machines.
There are like for instance Half-Life, there's a Half-Life 2 mod. I don't remember the name of it. They hired the guy that made it. They were like,
Oh.
this is a good enough game. Let's let's get you in here, boy.
Valve always
So like
seems very open to that.
they're very forward thinking, you know what I mean? And then the other thing I like, and this is like so important to me, is like when we talk about all these flaws, Valve is, I think, one of the most transparent companies in
Mhm.
terms of design decisions.
Yeah, I love that they
You know
do
what I mean?
like the developer commentary. Like that's so interesting.
Exactly.
And you learn
That,
about
or they
like
do like the
no, it's like you learn why like they're pointing out like all the tricks they do to pull player attention to a particular area or something. Like that's so cool to like teach how the game design works.
Yeah, that transparency, and I really like to. So like, there are times where I'm like, I think you fucked up here, but like they thought about it. You know what I mean? They're not stupid. They knew what we were saying, and like they were like, well, I think this is the best choice, and then they did it. So like, in a lot of senses, I can forgive it. You know what I mean? I think in general, I think I like Half-Life more than like I think Portal 2 is a better story. I like Portal 1 more than 2. We'll get into that conversation one day, I guess. But like, in my opinion, I think Half-Life 2 is obviously not my favorite game. I don't even know what my favorite game is. But I think there's just something really cool about the experience. In terms of first-person shooters, Half-Life 2 is kind of what I want in a campaign.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I think there's a lot of times where games will imitate it, and like I can't play, like I like Call of Duty campaigns, but to me half the time especially when they start half baking it or whatever, it doesn't feel rewarding.
And I think like how would you like to me the best shooter is like Halo, and I say that as someone that like only completed the games like this year. How would you like Halo 2 released the same year as this? How would you compare this to like Halo 2?
I think there's the other thing I like about Half-Life is there's no other way to say it other than it feels like a PC game. Does that make sense?
No, that checks out. It feels very player computer or personal computer.
There's no other way to say it. Whereas Halo clearly feels like a console game, and I think fundamentally the only way I can convey my preference is by saying I would prefer this PC game to the Halo console experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that checks out.
I think I like how this approaches cinema, and I think I like how it approaches storytelling and immersion and gameplay and gunplay more than Halo does. I like Halo a lot. I think Halo is probably, in terms of at least a franchise, the best console shooter. Probably. I can't imagine much better. Maybe Titanfall 2 or some shit. But whatever. But for me, Half-Life 2 is like the pinnacle of a design principle thing of like how a campaign should go. And I prefer that over Halo. I don't know why.
Okay. Yeah, no, that completely makes sense. I'm just trying to get a grasp on because like, I wasn't there when this game came out. Like, and you're clearly more of the fan base than I. So I'm just trying to live vicariously through you. 20 some years of missed like fan crafting and theorizing. Was this a game you talked about with your chums on the schoolyard? Because this seems like a game ripe for like kids bullshitting like, oh, if you backtrack to Kleiner's lab, you'll get to see like Alex changing or something like that.
No, I mean, honestly, no. I never talked with people about this game. I guess I should have. Part of it feels like personal in that sense, where it's like even now as we've done this podcast and I think we're wrapping up at this point, I don't feel like we've like cracked the nut. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I feel like this game's hard to talk about.
I think because its legacy is so overwhelming, it's like what I'm still trying to piece together like how this game, like it's a good game. It's a very good game. But like the overwhelming legacy is just like unavoidable with it.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it falls flat from that. This is not a 10 out of 10 game. I think like an 8, like a real 8, like a real 9, I think those are viable depending on how much you take legacy into account.
Yeah.
Because like this game is also a little rough. This is probably the worst looking Source Engine game. This, like, you know what I mean?
I was
like,
actually thinking that it held up pretty well.
It does hold up well. I think the Source Engine's a pretty good engine.
Yeah.
And like later on they'll just add upgrades to it. But like that being said, like this game does show wrinkles, right? And even now in terms of gameplay design, like there are some outdated parts to it. Maybe in 30 years the new podcasters will talk about Half-Life 2 the way we just talked about Half-Life 1, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think we've hit that point yet. And for now, I think it's fine. Yeah.
So let me ask you, straight-faced,
Go ahead.
do you think Half-Life 3 is real?
Yes, I do. Okay, here's what I'll say. I think it is one of those things where Valve wants to quote unquote do it right, or do it at a point in time to where they feel like they can market it as something as big. Because like both of these games, I will say, it's amazing in a series where you've got like the two numbered titles be such pivotal titles for a genre.
Yeah.
So they don't want to just fart a 3 out. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Do
you feel
so
they should have farted
sense,
a 3 out by this point in time?
No. I think in terms of development hell, it's not in hell. It's more like stasis. It's more like the G-Man Gabe Newell has put Half-Life into a stasis. When the time is right, it comes out. Half-Life Alyx, I think, was like a dip of the toes into the water of virtual reality to see if that was the viable turn for things to take. I think the issue with virtual reality is it is a very limited player base.
Yeah.
It is too expensive and tech heavy to where you could not make a genre-defining game like on such a pivotal level with such a limited audience.
Yeah.
So I think that is the failure of that. So I think Half-Life 3 is still in limbo, but it will come one day. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Would you be open to more games in the Half-Life universe, not necessarily a Half-Life 3? Do you think there should have been more like Episode 3 or spin-offs? The Barry Calhoun story.
This could go into different things. Number one, like we have Portal. And I think Portal is a great thing where it's like, it is its completely own thing, but it still wants to add to the Half-Life universe. So they'll make a joke once or twice, you know, and then that's it. And that's as much as you need, right? But like Valve did experiment with the episode storytelling. And I think the episodes worked a little bit. I think the issue was with the time and effort. It started to be limiting. For instance, Half-Life Alyx has a new engine to it. They had to they made a new engine for Half-Life Alyx, right? Half-Life Episode 2 is the source engine still, and it's starting to run out. Portal 2 source engine's starting to, you know, it's not chugging as much as it used to, right? I think those are the moments where it can be limiting, so then they need to refresh. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah, no, that checks out. Man, Half-Life 2 just ends on such a cliffhanger that it's very shocking to me. I guess the episodes expand on that. Like, do the episodes... I assume Gordon Freeman's still the protagonist, or is it Alyx?
Yes, you are correct. Gordon Freeman is still the protagonist.
Okay.
In fact, I would say I think the problem I have with Half-Life 2's ending, and this is spoiler alert for episode 1 of Half-Life 2, it sort of nullifies it. They go back on these. They go back on the endings a lot in Half-Life. And I think that's a problem to where it's like, okay, they clearly make the game they have first. And then they write themselves into a corner and then they get out of the corner. Like,
okay.
And then it sort of feels lame. But yeah, you know.
Okay. So it's like G-Man's taking Gordon away and then Lamar the head crab comes in and trips up the G-Man.
Something like that.
Okay.
Yep, something like that. Yeah, you'll be like, oh, so this didn't pay off at all. Yeah. There's a lot of not paying off, as you said.
Okay.
Right?
Well, now I'm not so interested, but...
No, I will say the games are really good.
No, I believe that.
Episode 2, in particular, is really good. Episode 1, it feels like you are tagging along with Alyx. There's, you know...
Well, episode 1 came out, 3 years after the fact? So is it more of like a refresher, like remember Half-Life 2?
A little bit. I mean, they do some unique stuff and new stuff, but like largely speaking, they sort of highlight certain aspects of it and emphasize those a little bit. Like if you felt like the Anti-Citizen 1 stuff was lacking in the base game, episode 1 fleshes that out a little bit. But
Okay.
like episode 2 is much longer than episode 1, and they go for completely unique things to it. And they do, like, for me, episode 2 has the most notable achievement possibly of all time, which is taking the gnome from the beginning of the game to the end of the game. It's sort of like your companion. You know what I mean?
No, I
It's
don't. The gnome, like David the gnome.
like it's like a statue gnome. You know what I'm
Yeah,
talking
no,
about.
I know. I know what you mean.
Yeah, yeah. They call him Gnome Chomsky.
Are you shitting me?
No, I'm not shitting you.
What a reference.
It's crazy, man.
Noam Chomsky's still alive, I think.
Yeah, they named it after a dead guy. But then again, there's probably so few people named Gnome.
I guess.
It's kind of hard to make.
What,
the
you
joke.
think they just Googled and didn't, like, look into... Okay.
Yeah. Last thing, we gotta say it. You mentioned it to me. I feel compelled to say it. So Valve was compelled to, when they were doing the episodes, they were also considering spin-offs. And I would have liked spin-offs by different studios. I think that would have been really cool.
Yeah.
I think it is a missed opportunity. They were going to do different things like Ravenholm.
Yeah.
The two companies, both companies would have probably made an interesting game worth playing. One of them was Arcane, famous for Deathloop and famous for,
Dishonored.
Prey and Dishonored. Like, an amazing developer would have made a fucking killer Ravenholm expansion.
Yeah, but who's the other one, Brogan? What's the other studio?
The other studio is Junction Point Games with Warren Spector as the lead.
And why didn't they make Ravenholm, Brogan?
Because they went in talks with Disney and started making Epic Mickey. Would you have preferred Junction Point Ravenholm or Epic Mickey? The ultimate question to tie everything together.
I think, you know what? I think Ravenholm is actually fine as is.
I agree. I mean, technically, I would have been super okay with Arcane doing it. I don't think Junction Point needed to do a Ravenholm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they probably couldn't have gotten Oswald in Ravenholm.
No, I think that would have been a much harder deal. You know what I mean?
Okay. So here's the final ultimate question to tie it all in.
Okay.
If Half-Life 3 was coming out, would you want Gordon Freeman to talk?
Oh, this is a good question.
Do you want, like, that? Because they would, like, build the trailer around that. Where it's like, are you ready, Gordon? Oh, yeah.
Oh, they would. No, I think people. They would have to, I guess, so people would be. Here's what I would do. If you asked me what I would do, I would either say a no, period, flat no. And that's probably what they'll go with. They will probably make Gordon not talk. I think they will just commit to that. And then they'll have other protagonists talk now. Because Alex talked.
Yeah.
So, like they will just accept that if it's a numbered Half-Life and it's Gordon Freeman, he ain't talking. That's just, otherwise they will get crucified, right?
Yeah.
I think what they should do is what JRPGs do, which is if you are a main protagonist, you don't talk. But let's say Half-Life 2 stars somebody else for even just a little bit.
Yeah.
And Gordon Freeman is an NPC. They should make the NPC Gordon Freeman talk. That's what I think.
Huh. I don't know about that. I think that would be too much whiplash.
People would be upset. I know people would be upset. Here's the thing is, I don't care about other people. That's just what I would do creatively.
You'd have to do it, like, in the first level to get...
Yes. Yeah, basically you'd have to start with, like, a completely new person, and then, like Gordon would come out, save you with his HEV suit, just, like, fucking murder shit, and then, like, he'd extend his arm and be like, cat, got your tongue? And then everyone would go crazy.
Yeah. I don't know.
That's it.
I think I prefer Gordon to stay silent.
I would get crucified. That's it. No, I mean, I think they'll do that. I think they'll do number one.
Yeah.
That's just what I would do, because I do think it's limiting. Like, we just talked about the limitations, and we start to run its course. I think after Half-Life 2, Gordon not talking is running its course. So, that's it. I think, I don't know what else we could say about these games.
Yeah. Well,
all right. Actually, not talking about these games anymore, talking about the podcast. This is our first time we've done games so big. These are the biggest games we've done, I'm like 90% sure. And then number 2, we've done the first double feature, and it's with you, Murph. How did you feel? Do you want to do smaller titles, or do you like doing big titles?
I can juggle with the best of them. Because I played both these games, and I played my little indie games, and I've also started Resident Evil 3.
Oh, I can't wait for that discussion.
It's, I mean, I don't know how much more I'm going to be playing of it, given what's coming out tomorrow.
Well, we'll see what happens. Well, to be fair, Murph, if you play for another hour or 2, you'll probably be fine.
Is that right? Don't tell me that.
I have no idea where you're at, but let me just say the game is short. I mean, I think you can gather that.
Oh, jeepers. We'll see.
Anyways, no, but like, and I'm guessing you'll play Resident Evil 8 in the meantime.
Yeah.
And then we will have a game that sort of ties it all in together. I think I chose this game for us to play because of the Resident Evil experience, which is Dino Crisis for the PlayStation 1.
Dino Crisis.
Yes.
Dino Crisis.
Where it's basically a Capcom Resident Evil, but it's Jurassic Park. So
that does sound real nifty. I wonder if I can still tank control like I used to.
I ain't spoiling nothing. See you guys next time, everybody.
Listen, do you want me to call public safety?
Do you want me to get naked and start the revolution?